Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Spiritual Download, everybody. It's 6:30, so let's get started here on our next Tuesday talk number 4. So we're looking at subjective awareness is king. Okay, so in this I have a few notes about subjectivity and the importance of subjectivity. And I'm going to be comparing that with the idea of objectivity. Okay, so let's first define these terms. Let's define these terms. Okay. One announcement before we get started is next week, next Tuesday talk is the election. Let me put my phone away. Speaking of addictions, cell phone addictions. So next Tuesday is the election. Okay. So am I going to be going live or am I not going to be going live? I am going live next week. And I'm going to be discussing politics. So in college, I majored in political science, kind of like international politics, and I majored in philosophy, those two things. So I have political views from a deeper perspective, I would say, because I see it from a philosophical point of view. It's kind of like my views of politics are more in line with the philosophy of and the spirituality of politics. So you can stay tuned for that next Tuesday at 6:30 Central. Okay, so what is subjectivity? Subjectivity is you, is your awareness, my awareness. It's who I believe that I am. Okay. And that's compared to this so-called thing called the objective world, where it's kind of one way of explaining it that I've heard from Ken Wilber and also some of my friends who study Ken Wilber is the it space, the it space. So the it space is what we all seemingly agree upon that is the world. And that, for example, you see a car drive by and everybody agrees that a car drove by. Okay, so that's the idea of the objective world. It's something theoretically that you sense through your senses. And it's basically the content. It's the content of senses. Okay, so but what we're looking at here is which one is more real. Obviously, I think that subjectivity is going to be more real and more important, okay, than objectivity. But for the sake of talk, we want to compare and contrast the two, and why I think that objectivity is a little bit overrated in our society. Okay, so we talked about the general differences of subjectivity and objectivity. Now, the next question is this: does objectivity and the objective world actually exist? Okay, so the first thing I want you to think about is, have you ever experienced something that is outside of your experience? Have you ever experienced something outside of your subjective experience? No. Okay, now think about this. Has there ever been a time when you felt like the objective world, the theoretical objective world, seemed dreamlike and didn't seem like other people were kind of like aware of what you were aware of, or are aware of what you are aware of? Just think of dreaming. Just think of the dream state, right? How is that objective? How in the world is the dream state objective? How could, like a scientist, study the contents of your dreams, not the idea like, okay, neuron X and neuron Y fired, therefore he's in the dream state or she is in a deep dream state. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about experience, actual experience. Okay, another thing is, think about this. Okay, so one way of thinking about subjective experience is perspective. Perspective. So I want you to think about this. Which perspective is the ultimate perspective? Which perspective is the ultimate perspective? you might want to say like God's perspective is the ultimate perspective, right? Like God theoretically has this bird's eye view or this God eye view of everything and creates everything. King David, hey, welcome back. Now, is it possible for a human being to experience that? Like a scientist. I'm saying a human. You know, if it's possible to be aware of everything that God is aware of, are you still a human being? Like, is it possible for a scientist to do science from the perspective of God? Like, what I mean by that is the ultimate perspective. If God is the ultimate perspective, I would say no. And so, is it? I guess I'm concluding that scientists only have a perspective, that all human beings, not just scientists, have or are doing science from a perspective. Okay. But which perspectives are more valid than others? Okay, we might think that, yeah, maybe everything is based on perspective in this world, but aren't there some perspectives that are better than others? Yeah, probably. But all of those are relative. Like all of those are relative. Good. The idea of good and bad is relative, right? It's all dependent on things like culture. One of the main things is culture is so strong. Culture is so strong in what we believe, how we think, our structures of thought, our epistemology, our metaphysics, our philosophy, even our spirituality. Even our spirituality, because oftentimes, for example, what we experience in meditation is sometimes interpreted through a perspective, through my perspective or through your perspective. Okay. Now, so an alternative viewpoint, an alternative view is, I want to refer you to my Tuesday talk, numero uno. Tuesday talk number 1, I talked about ways of being. And then I argued that there are, instead of saying that there's like this objective world, basically, like how most of science argues, I say that instead of that, there are 100 trillion, there are an infinite amount of ways of being. And that the idea of the ways of being is I would say, something I stumbled upon or something that I've learned and heard about. And I think it's kind of an up and coming epistemology and metaphysics, which means philosophy. So with that said, ways of being is similar to perspective. So a way of being is kind of like a perspective. It's a viewpoint in the universe. It's a viewpoint in the universe. Now, is there anything besides ways of being in the universe? Is there anything besides perspective? I mean, kind of a thought experiment. I haven't thought about this before, but like a cardboard box. Is a cardboard box, what exactly is a cardboard box? Is that a way of being? Is it a thing? Is a cardboard box a thing? Is it a consciousness? Is it a perspective? What exactly is a cardboard box? Really think about it. Instead of having it be, oh, my culture told me it's a thing, right? If we admit it to ourselves, if we're extremely honest with ourselves, we have to admit that our culture taught us that a cardboard box is a thing rather than a way of being. Okay. So one term I want to introduce is the idea of intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity. So maybe the universe is made up of ways of being, or inter ways of being, or intersubjectivity. Basically, that maybe all that we are experiencing is just different viewpoints, different perspectives, and that each perspective has its own interpretations of what it's perceiving. Because one thing I want you to think about is this. Now, I kind of was thinking about this over the weekend. I was trying different teas. I'm getting more into tea. Like this is a chamomile herbal tea. I don't know if I told you guys this, but right at the beginning of COVID, I stopped drinking coffee basically because the caffeine just was. I just realized it was too strong in my heart, and I wanted to be healthier. So I switched to black tea, then quickly switched to green tea, and then switched mostly to herbal tea. So I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about teas, and then I kind of was thinking, now how do I know whether this tea is good? A tea that I've never tried before. How do I know it's good? How do you know that it tastes good and that it feels good while drinking it and feels good after drinking it? Would you trust an objective viewpoint? Like, is there an objective viewpoint actually of a tea flavor? Like how a tea drinks? How do you know that it's good? Is it like inherently good or inherently bad? Would science be able to study it without tasting it? So science, how science works is actually not that it would taste the tea, right? Science would go in there and would discuss the amino acids or something of the tea, or it might study like the temperature, and it would be a lot about measurements and viewing the chemistry of the tea, and not ever actually drinking the tea. Okay, so for example, this tea we call it chamomile tea, right? We call it chamomile tea from our perspective. Now, what actually is it, though? Because it's a word, it's like a category that we say, this here is chamomile tea. That tea over there is not chamomile tea, right? That's what human beings do. That's what our minds do, is we categorize things, right? We categorize things. We say, this is that, and that is not this. Things like this. Now, what is more real? Me calling all chamomile tea and putting all chamomile tea in one box and saying this is how chamomile tea is. But what if there's some nuance even within chamomile tea? All right, like this is what's it called? Bungalow tea? Bungalow, Bigelow cozy chamomile. So this is technically chamomile tea. So I drink it. Now, drinking it though, I just had an experience, right? I just had an experience of the tea. Now I want to describe for you what it tastes like, right? I can try and use words. I could say that it tastes flowery. It tastes kind of sweet. It's more of an evening drink. It tastes better in the evening than in the morning. It's smooth. Now, am I describing how it actually tastes like though? Or would you rather trust if I say, it's good, you should try it? Just try it. It's really good. Just try it. I recommend that you try it. Or maybe I try a different tea and I didn't like it. And I said, you could try it. I didn't like it, but you could try it. And then a third category is I tried it, it's terrible, I don't recommend it at all. Now, what is a recommendation? Is that based on objectivity or is it based off of subjectivity? So I would say I recommend that you try this chamomile tea, this one. Like, I don't know exactly if all chamomile teas are good. I'm saying that this one is really good. Yeah. And then I put trust in Bigelow to produce teas that are very similar. So that's what branding is, right? Like McDonald's makes Big Macs the same every time. But actually each Big Mac is not the same. Okay, there might actually be a slight difference between every Big Mac. There might be a slight difference. And within Bigelow Cozy Chamomile Tea, there might be a slight difference between each one. Okay, so it's if I say I recommend that you try it from my experience. Okay, I'm talking about from my experience, and can I know what you experience drinking the tea? Even, think about this. Even if you drink Bigelow Cozy Chamomile Tea, Cyrus Black, welcome back. Even if you also drink Bigelow Cozy Chamomile Tea, first of all, it's not the same one, right? It's not the same tea. It has the same brand on it, right? But what is a brand exactly? You know, it's just something that we kind of trust, but it's not the same exact tea. Plus, I'm not you. I am like ultimately we are ultimately, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about that way of being, because there actually is there even an ultimate way of being, an ultimate infinite way of being. We've never experienced that. We've never experienced that. So how do we know? So all we know is that we are living in an intersubjective world where we have people like King David, Cyrus Black, Kyle, and we could all be trying different teas, and we give you all these different perspectives. But ultimately, it's about you. It's about you going to try the teas, and then you making the judgment, and then you saying, okay, I recommend this one and not that one to other subjectives, to other ways of being that we call human beings or people or friends. Okay, so now, so would you trust more someone like me, maybe a friend like me, say, okay, I really like this Bigelow tea, this Bigelow Cozy Milk Chamomile tea, and I recommend that you try it. Would you trust that, or would you rather trust like some scientific paper that describes the tea in detail and never really actually talks about the actual flavor? It just talks about all of its characteristics. It talks about its history. It talks about where it comes from. It talks about the people who grew it. Basically, yeah, the whole history of the tea and its contents. Does that equal what it feels like for you to drink it? So really, that's just what we're comparing here. Okay, next. So I just kind of talked about this. Now, I asked this at the beginning. Have you ever experienced anything that is beyond your experience? Have you ever experienced anything that is beyond your experience? No, right? So, where is everything happening? What is everything happening inside of? What is everything happening as? What is everything happening? What is the essence of everything happening? All of the people, all of the cars, all of the trees, all of the events. Okay. What is all of that happening inside of? It's happening inside of your experience, your consciousness. Basically, what I'm going to call this is consciousness. Everything that you could possibly be aware of is consciousness, and it's one consciousness. Have you ever experienced another consciousness? No. You could call it that. You could. So I used to teach grammar, and one thing with nouns is there are some nouns that are uncountable, that they're so difficult to count that they're just considered uncountable, like sand and sugar. So there's no plural. Like you don't say, okay, we have 2 sands. Like, no, you just call it sand no matter what. Even if you have 1, or if you have 1,000,000,000, you just call it sand. So that is uncountable. So consciousness, I would say, is uncountable. It's not even really one. It's just uncountable. And that it's all your consciousness. Even the word you is not correct. Saying that consciousness is your consciousness, it could be that it's just consciousness and that nobody owns it. And that actually that consciousness existed before the human being existed. And that the consciousness is going to exist past the human being that you believe that you are, and that I believe that I am, right? So perhaps everything is the consciousness, the consciousness. Okay. Now within that consciousness, there are there are different perspectives, right? Like I said, these perspectives I'm going to call awareness. Okay, so I'm saying consciousness is the consciousness. It's basically anything that you could possibly be aware of. And then awareness is where your attention is. Okay, so awareness is connected with attention. Okay, so look, so I could lead you in a 1-minute guided meditation, for example. So become aware of the top of your head. Become aware of the top of your head. Now become aware of the space of the room that you're in. Become aware of the space of the room in which you are. Okay. Now try and be aware of outside. Try and be aware of outside. And then try and become aware of the sky, the energy, the beingness of the sky, and ultimately the universe. Become aware of the beingness of the physical universe. Now return your awareness away from that and return to your heart space. Become aware of your heart. Maybe feel it beating in your chest. And then return your awareness to where it was at the beginning of that meditation. Okay? So that's kind of how meditation works, is being aware of the field of consciousness, being aware of different things, different aspects of all that is consciousness. Okay, so I want to ask you, you guys can type it in the chat here, whoever followed along. How did you feel when you became aware of the sky and the universe? How did you feel when you became aware of the entire, what you could be aware of? Like we kind of kept expanding our awareness of consciousness. Try and describe how you kind of felt when you became aware of all of the universe. What did you experience when you became aware of the entire universe? I'm just kind of curious. Okay, so I want to move on. So now we have a difference between awareness and consciousness. So think about this. Maybe you are not aware that you are consciousness itself. Is it possible to be unaware that you are the consciousness? Is it possible that most people are aware of certain little things in life, certain human things, rather than consciousness itself? Okay, like what we just felt. Okay, so King David says, I don't know how to describe it, but simply awake. I guess like able to see everything. Yes, good. So let's kind of break this down. Break it down, break it down. Okay, so awakeness, very good. So we can be aware without being aware of awareness. That's pretty obvious. Okay, like most people are not aware of their awareness. When we're like me, when I'm at work, most of the day I'm not really aware of awareness, most of it. When I'm working with kids, when I'm giving a lesson, when I'm talking with coworkers, you know, I would say it's like 50-50. I'm either being aware of awareness itself or I'm too busy. It used to be like I was never aware of awareness before I started like meditating so much. And I would be at school or something, and I would not be aware of my awareness. My awareness would be mixed in all of the phenomenon that was going on. So basically, like King David is saying, not really awake, not really awake. Now, awakeness is like, wow, my awareness just expanded more into the field of consciousness, a little bit more. And like I said, it's like a field, but it's not really a field. It's not really a field. Like, again, put your awareness to the universe. Like, what exactly is this? Right? Is this everything? Is this nothing? Right? There's not really a word to describe it. And then we go to what King David said, able to see everything. Okay, so we could call the consciousness, we could say that's equivalent to everything. We could do that. Now, are you seeing it? Are you seeing it? What type of verb is it that makes us aware of the universe? Because it's not really that we're aware of everything, you could say, because I'm not aware of what you're thinking, right? You're not aware of what's going through my head. I'm not aware of what's happening in Iran right now, other part of the world, right? My awareness doesn't do that. Well, that's because we're still stuck in awareness on some level and not experiencing all of the levels that awareness could bring within all of the possibilities of consciousness. Because consciousness is infinite, and within is the infinite of infinites. And within that infinite of infinites are all of these smaller infinities, all of these smaller ways of being that are more tied to like awareness, like a human being aware of his or her surroundings, which is just a perspective. All right. Let me know if you guys have any questions on that, or if you have any insights or experience or any comments as to how you experience awareness of consciousness. All right, so the next topic is truth and subjective awareness. So science, most of science may say that the subjective is not trustworthy and it's not valid, right? So if you think back to college, I don't know, maybe you guys are in college. How old are you guys? You could put down how old you guys. Yeah, I want to know a little bit more about you guys. So anybody down in the chat, tell me your age and where you're from. Okay, so maybe you're young, like King David is 17. So King David's probably in high school. So think about your chemistry class. Cyrus Black is 30. Yeah, so Cyrus Black, did you go to college? And then, oh, nice. Lives in Mankato. Cyrus Black lives in Canada. Awesome. Cool. I like building community with you guys. And King David is 17 from New Jersey. Awesome. Okay, so science class, usually it's skeptical of the feelings of humans, skeptical of the inner world of human beings. Basically, what science wanted to do was say, we can't trust all of the opinions and perspectives of humans because the belief is that it mixes things up too much, and that instead we want to focus on what we call the facts. Okay. Oh, we have an environmental coffee house says hi. Cool. So the idea of science removes all of the subjectiveness. It believes, right? So what we just talked about was that everything is based on the subjective. Everything is the subjective. Everything is awareness within awareness. Everything is awareness within the ultimate consciousness. Okay. Now, science comes along and says, we want to do something that's called, like Cyrus Black says, rational logical thinking. We want to do something called, that we're going to call rationality. We're going to call rationality better than all of the things that humans normally are aware of, such as emotions and perspectives. Yes, environmental coffee house, we are scientists. So we are scientists. That's for sure. That's for sure. And we're investigating through what? We're investigating through what? What are we investigating through? Subjective awareness. How can you get outside of your own awareness? Right? So we're actually, scientists are, their main tool, the main tool is their senses. Yes, our senses is connected to our awareness. The senses is what is how we connect to other awarenesses. It's what connects us to the whole field of consciousness. Okay, even what we call the physical world, and that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Is so science said that there is a physical world out there that can be, measured, and we can create facts about it that will be true. Okay. Now, so science may say subjective is not trustworthy and valid. Now, is that true, or is that from a perspective? So next I have in my notes. That may seem true. What I mean by that, it may seem true that we can create an objective world outside of what we call our awareness. And we could say, okay, anything within human beings' awareness is invalid. We're going to draw a line between the human mind and the outside world. We're going to draw a line there and say that whatever we experience is invalid, and anything in this what we call physical world is valid and testable. Okay. Now, is that true, or is that from the perspective of science? So what if it's just a perspective that's a thing? What if science is a perspective? What if exploration of the physical world is a perspective, and that there are other perspectives like meditation, like what we can experience in deep states of meditation? Now, is that science? Okay, so let's go back to Environmental Coffee House. So we are scientists. Yes. So imagine, I don't know if you've ever had a deep experience in meditation. You guys can write this in the chat. Have you ever had a deep experience in meditation? And what did you experience? Cool. Try and use words to describe what you experienced. Okay. Now, is that science? Is that testable? Well, from how science is structured right now, it's not really testable, because again, through science, we created a boundary between what humans experience and the physical world. So if you're experiencing something that seems not physical, like in deep states of meditation, how science is structured can't, test it. But what if science returned back to like it was before it called itself science? What if science returned back to something like natural philosophy, where we're going to investigate our own being, our own reality, our inner reality? What if we explore our own inner reality? Is that science? Can that be science? Could that be science in the future? Okay. All right, so let's see here. Cyrus Black, science is a way of trying to make sense of the unknown. Nice. The unknown. Yeah. Is there anything that is within the known? Like, what does it mean to know something actually? What does it mean to know that there's a physical world out there? Do you know for certain that there is a physical world out there that is outside of your own awareness? All right. And King David, I definitely have. It was a rush of emotions throughout my heart. Nice. Yep. So when we open our consciousness, oftentimes we unstick or we let loose emotions that have been stuck inside of our body for like most of our life. So that could definitely happen. Now think about this, King David. What was it that those emotions happened inside of? What was it that was there that the emotions happened inside of? Next, like the Egyptians, right? Oh, yeah. So the Egyptians, we could talk. I want to do more studying of the ancient Egyptians beyond just like what I teach in school, but like their connection to the whole universe. What I mean by that is like they may have had connections to other densities of consciousness, other dimensions of consciousness. That's very possible. They could have been having communicating with aliens, other, that's what we say for other forms of life within this universe. Now, what if within this universe it's not just physical, right? Even science says that there's 11 dimensions within this universe. So what if it's possible for there to be a race of beings in one of those 11 dimensions? Because we, in this physical world that we call, are only able to perceive like the first three or the first four. I think they say time space is the fourth dimension. So, that's possible. All right, environmental coffee house. Let me kind of look over what some of you guys' experiences were with meditation. I was dreaming. What if I climbed to the clouds? What would I find? I was thinking. What if I left the road behind? Where would it take me? Someplace so familiar yet so unfamiliar, still anchored to this life, weighted by gravity, still focused to the ground, but to soar beyond, if only for a moment. Nice. So it sounds like environmental coffee house, that you've experienced lucid dreaming, where the dream all of a sudden becomes a world, and you're like, wow, I can go and do within this world. I can go explore this world that we call dream. Okay. Nice. Now, Alexios. Hello, Alexios. I suppose to really know something, you have to become it. Yes. Yes. So have you ever, let's see. Yeah, to truly understand something, is it through study of it? And what I mean by study is like that it's still outside of you. Can you truly understand what that thing is? Or is it that the only thing you truly understand is your own awareness? That truly that you don't even understand your own humanness. You don't even understand like my own me. Is that possible to not really understand what it truly means to be me? Or is it that all we know is that I'm aware? Not even I, right? Just aware, awake, conscious awake. Is that all that we know? All right. All right, so it looks like Environmental Coffee House had a big experience. Let me read your last one here. I dream of an offering passing from my mind through my heart and into the palms of another. I receive a blessing and turn and drift away back to the world I came from. Environmental Coffee House, are you a poet? You have a really beautiful way of describing this. It's extremely beautiful. Read this later. Yeah. All right, Cyrus Black. Science is usually cause and effect. Yes. For sure. So now think about this. So we say cause and effect as if those are two different things, right? Now in India, they call it karma. That's called karma. So what if there isn't just cause and effect, but that there is just happening? It kind of brings it back into a little bit more of a sense of non-duality or oneness. Okay. Oh, so you were reading something from a friend, Sarvatazio. Nice. He spent a lot of time with the Tibetan monks, and I've learned a lot from him. Beautiful. Beautiful friend. That's lovely. Wow. Yeah. Okay, so let me move on here. And Cyrus Black says E equals mc squared. Yep. So what exactly? So like a scientific theory like that, where it tries and explain all of these phenomena, right? Um, so I'm talking about the experience that you get from experiencing that phenomena, those phenomena, right? Like time and space. Is it more accurate to create a theory about it? I mean, that's really useful. It's super useful to create um, a theory about time and space. But is it more possible to know time and space through just experiencing it, right? I feel like I know. I'm actually talking about this in my down below here. So let me move on. Okay, so but what about your perspective or subjective experience? Okay, yeah. So what about yours? Not just so so science has said that it is kind of the big player in the game of reality, that it is the one that could potentially explain all of these things. Now, but why is it that science tries to convince you to ignore your subjective experience? Why is that invalid to dive into your own subjective experience? Why is that invalid? What if my experience is even more real than what science is trying to tell me what's real? What if? I'm just asking the question. Okay. All right. So the next part I was going to get to is time. So let's do another short meditation thing. Now, thinking about time. So let's say that we're trying to describe what time really is, okay? And that there's two alternatives. We can either read a scientific article about time, or we could do this. Okay, so what I want you to do is sit quietly and just become aware and try to become aware of time. Feel what it feels like to experience time. So sit there for another 10 seconds. What is time? Am I experiencing time? Very good. Okay. So, what did you feel? Did you feel what time could be? Or did it feel actually more like, I don't really know what time is? Not really sure. Not really sure whether time actually exists. Our conception of time as moments moving forward, and that there's a past, there's a future. It seems like I'm not really sure what time is. King David. I agree. When I try and feel it, I don't really know. You know, my body and mind can kind of guess what time it is, but that's not really what I mean. Like in Spanish, they actually distinguish time, tiempo, with the time, la hora, the hour, the time versus the hour. So yeah, I mean, the hour is something that we use to go to work and things like this. But time, el tiempo, what exactly is that? What exactly is that, right? Is it more accurate to say that time exists or that timelessness exists? Like, is timelessness even more real than time? I mean, what are we experiencing? What are we experiencing? Okay. All right, environmental coffee house. We really are running out of time on this earth. We have destroyed it as humans and have destroyed natural habitat, ecosystems, and wildlife. So what is time? So yeah, it's another topic. I don't want to get into that idea, but yeah, I completely agree. What exactly is time? Alexios, I haven't had many deep meditation experiences, but the deepest I've had actually completely revolved around the concept of time. Cool. I remember sitting there wondering how long have I been in this meditation. And then I realized that time exists only when I think about it. Yes, time only exists when we think about it. The hour only exists when we think about it. But what are we experiencing, right? Yep. All right, environmental coffee house. Death will be timelessness. Yeah, death will definitely be outside of time, I would say. But the question is here, environmental coffee house. We just did this 30-second meditation. Did we experience timelessness? Some would say, yeah, we did. Now, what if that's what death is? That means that we can experience what it's like to not have a body anymore. It's possible, right? All right, Alexios. Otherwise, when time is not being held in my consciousness, it simply doesn't exist. The idea. So time is a scientific theory, right, guys? So time is a scientific theory. It's a way of trying to explain, even space. So what I could have done also is space. So what I do with what we just did with time, we could do that with space. Now, space is a little bit harder. I think that's a little bit more of an advanced stage. But there's a possibility where you could do that with space too, not just time. So maybe you could try that tonight. All right, environmental coffee house. I like your. Okay, thank you. Yeah, cool. We'll be talking for a while here. I have a lot more to say. Lexios. I don't know if that is accurate, but that's what sort of suddenly struck me. Yeah, good. I agree. It's either that you're aware of it or it doesn't exist. And Sandy. Okay, thank you, Sandy. Environmental coffee house is Sandy. Nice to meet you. All right. So what we're returning back to is what we just experienced. So science says time exists. Now, truth. What exactly is truth? So I have a video on this channel about truth that I put out about 3 months ago, or like a month ago or something. Now, truth is that which we are experiencing. Truth is what we are experiencing. So science says there's this theory that there's this thing called time. Now, when we try and sit and experience time, we're like, well, what exactly are you talking about? Like something moving forward, something moving back? What do you mean? I don't really experience that thing that you say time is. So there might be a separation between science and truth. So truth is, again, that which we experience. And science is out there trying to discover facts. So we can maybe distinguish between truth and facts. So now let's talk about the human mind. Now, it's important to say that the human mind that we have has been, I would say, kind of owned by science. So science is this what exactly is it? It's a community. First of all, it's a community of people, but also it's kind of an institution. It's an institution that has a lot of power in our society. Has a lot of power, and that institution, it's in our schools, it's in our universities, and it's what most people believe in. Okay, now, so science is also a metaphysics and an epistemology. It's a philosophy. It creates a theory of truth and it creates a theory of reality. So theory of truth is epistemology, and theory of reality is called metaphysics. So our mind has been, I would say, created through this institution that we call science. Okay, that's not just true with you; it's true with all of us. Okay, so when we grow up, right? Like, let's see, King David is in high school, okay, and is experiencing science class, and is being taught things that science believes is true. Okay. Now, I know King David is probably more advanced than this, but most of us probably just assume that what we're learning is true. We just take it and say, yes, this is probably true. It makes sense. Just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's objectively true. Just because it makes, and we're going to be talking about this, 1 + 1 = 2. What most people say is, that's a fact. That's a fact, Jack. 1 + 1 = 2. Now, it just seems true, right? It sounds true, but we'll investigate as to whether that's true or not. Okay, so that'll be down below. So let's just kind of say that our mind has largely been influenced by science. Our mind. Now, what is the difference between consciousness, your awareness of consciousness, and your mind? Okay, so that's just something to think about. So we have mind, awareness, and consciousness. Mind, awareness, and consciousness. Now, let's see the difference. So we were just talking about being aware of the consciousness. I said expand your awareness to the universe. Now, become aware of your mind. Become aware of your mind. Become aware of the thinking happening in your mind. What are the thoughts that are appearing as we continue to be aware of the mind, your mind? Okay, very good. So now the question is this: can you be aware of your mind? Can you be aware of your mind? Seems like yes. Seems like yes. Okay, so our awareness is different than our mind. Awareness is different, and our awareness is different than consciousness. So that's why we have these three. Now, our human mind, like I said, is highly influenced by science. So here's the question. This is gonna be one of the takeaways from this episode, but can we trust our own thoughts? Can we trust our own thoughts to be true? It's kind of a takeaway question. So we said that we can become aware of our mind, and our mind has been highly influenced by science, in all of its theories. So should we, or can we trust our own thoughts? Okay, so that's just something I want you guys to think about. Now, is subjectivity equivalent to truth? So in my video, I said yes. That truth is that which we are aware of, and actually not even the interpretation of it. Okay, so let's stretch this. So interpretation, where does that happen? The interpreting, where does that happen? Does that happen in awareness, or does that happen in the mind? Interpretation. Can you be aware of you interpreting? What exactly is interpretation? Do you need language to interpret? Do you need things like feelings to interpret? Well, if that's true, can you be aware of feelings? Right? I think it was Cyrus Black who was saying that he had a big meditation and that he had feelings. Now, is it impossible to be aware of those emotions and feelings as we're meditating? Yes. So can we be aware of the interpretation that we're using with our mind? Yes. Okay. So I would say science is an interpretation of the world. It's a perspective of the world, and it's connected to our mind. Now, subjective awareness is simply being aware, simply being aware. So subjective awareness versus interpretation of the mind, which one do you think is more trustworthy, you could say? Well, the human mind is more, it's what we kind of connect with more in the Western world, because in the Western world, we're all about doing. We're a lot about going to work. We're a lot about going to school. we're a lot about using science to interpret the world. We're usually, taught to be very active with our mind and interpret the world a lot. So that might seem more fun and what we vibe with more in the West. Now, subjective awareness, however, simply being aware of awareness, breathing, being aware of the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, being aware of your body, like feeling your hands, being aware of your feet, being aware of your head. So this is, this tool, we call it subjective awareness. So that's different than the mind. This is more connected with our intuition. So now I just said that, interpretation and science and judgment and most of our lives happens in our mind, okay, which is more connected to our brain. We're much more, we tend to think that mind and brain are connected. Okay, now let's have a whole new paradigm. Let's have a whole new perspective. Now, what if it's possible to have mind in your heart and in your gut, which I'm going to change gut to belly? Is it possible for your heart to be connected to mind and your belly to be connected to mind? Or basically that, let's just say, is it possible that your heart has a mind of its own and that your belly has a mind of its own? If we just disconnect what we've been taught that mind equals brain, let's just think, is it possible for heart to be a mind and for the belly to be a mind? Okay. Well, maybe we can be aware of these areas. Is it possible to be aware of my heart? Is it possible to be aware of my belly? Okay. Okay, so let me say that later. Let me go through to some of these comments here. All right. All right, but sunset and sunrise define time, and in the poles, time is different than what we Westerners think of it as. Yep. So we have sunset and sunrise, and that's a way of interpreting what's happening in the world. Is it possible to live a human life without ever being aware of the hour? Well, that's what we were doing for most of our 99.9% of our history. Is the hour never existed. We simply knew the sun and the moon and the stars and the changing of the seasons here on Earth. So definitely possible. All right. King David, something I think about from time to time is why is a second or a minute 60 seconds? It is a construct and not necessarily true. Very good. Very, very good. Yep. I think the hour is based off of the calendar, and that the calendar is based off of either the sun or the moon. So there are solar calendars and there are lunar calendars. So yeah, I think so. All right. Linear time is a weird concept. Yes, it doesn't seem like time is linear when you sit here and meditate, right? I only trust my thoughts when I decide to think. Who decides to think? Right? Who is the thinker? Who is it that is doing the thinking? Right? Is it you, or is it simply a phenomenon? Simply a phenomenon, the thinking. Alexios, yeah, it seems like there's no real reason to trust your thoughts because you have little control over them. So that's just like what I said. Can you control your thoughts? First of all, it's not very easy. Second of all, is it even possible? Okay, it seems like they arrive out of thin air. Yeah, they just arise in awareness, right? They just arise in awareness. So in awareness, not as awareness, but in awareness. So what if we start identifying more with awareness rather than our thinking mind, right? Which one would become stronger longer. What if we shift our awareness to our heart mind and our belly mind more than being connected to the brain mind all of the time, all of the thinking, right? The way that the heart thinks is much more an intuitive thinking. The way that the belly thinks is much more of a strength way of thinking. So there's the intuition you get from your heart and the intuition that you get from your gut, and those might be even different, right? As a matter of fact, I've recently started deliberately ignoring my thoughts as best I can, and rather trust and act upon my feelings and intuition. Yes. You can kind of think of your thoughts more like as feelings. Like thinking is no different than feeling, right? We have feelings that just kind of come and go, and we have thoughts that just kind of come and go. You can either attach to those thoughts, you can either attach to those feelings, or we can kind of just experience them, be aware of them, and watch them kind of flood out or flush out. Yeah, yes, my gut definitely has its own heart. It's different from my mind, and my heart and my gut are in sync. Cool. Yeah, in your intuition. Yeah, I want you to think now, is there a difference between your heart and your gut? Now, that's the next thing to think about, or not think about, but to be aware of and experience. All right, so next. So let me read this. All right, I created a word here called logicify. Logicify. It could be logify too. Say, as soon as there is a desire to reason and be rational and logify something, it has already been stripped of its true essence. Okay, so this is something I thought about. As soon as there is a desire to reason and logify everything, or something, it has already been stripped of its true essence. Okay, so what does that exactly mean? So life, like we said, life is happening, like time. So going back to time. Now, if we try to reason how time works, right? The idea is most humans either think that it happens in a line or a circle, right? So we try to logify it. We say, all right, well, it seems like there are these events in my mind, and that there are these memories that I think happened in the past. So I think the past actually exists from my perspective. That's a theory that the past actually exists. Now, what about the future? It seems like this now moment is kind of moving into what I call the future, right? So now we're just thinking about it. Now we're logifying it and trying to reason how this thing that we call time works. Okay. Now, what's the true essence of this event, though? What is the true essence of it? The nature of rationality is to dominate over nature. So this is what Sandy was saying, Environmental Coffee House. Sandy was saying that we as humans are dominating over nature. So think of like a corporation. A corporation has a strong human mind to go out and use rationality and reason and math and science to extract natural resources in order to sell it in what we call the economy. So something like the economy. What exactly is that? Well, we have theories as to how it works. We either believe in socialism or laissez-faire capitalism, or we think that one of these is better than another. But what if the economy simply is? It simply exists. And that's what actually is it? We don't really know. We don't really know. Just like time, we don't really know what time is. The economy, we don't really know what the economy is. Okay. But when we start to have theories as to how the economy works, and we want to push that theory onto others and say, here's the best theory. Let's spread this across the world. That's exactly what happened in Christianity. Oh, we have this great interpretation of what this man named Jesus taught. Well, how do you know that your interpretation of what Jesus said is what Jesus actually meant? How do you know that your interpretation of what's in the Bible is the interpretation? We just talked about it at the beginning, right? What if there is no ultimate interpretation of the Bible? If it's simply that there are 7 billion interpretations of the Bible? Okay, so instead of going to spread and proselytize my opinion of the Bible to others and say, do you agree with me? You don't? Well, let's fight. This sounds absurd to me. This sounds absurd. That's what's been happening through all of history. So can we go beyond this idea that there is even an objective truth out there, and that the objective truth, conveniently I believe in, or conveniently is that which I believe in? So just see that that's absurd. All right, so a fun one here. What is 1 plus 1? What is 1 plus 1? Okay, so usually the way that 1 plus 1, 1, 1. Yeah, so 1 plus 1. It's hard because if you want to do it, you're like, okay, well, let's bring this thought into reality. So now we have a thing. So we have to say that this is a pen. This is a pen from our perspective, and it's a thing. Now let's compare this to what we call a coffee cup, right? Now a coffee cup is different than a pen. So is this one the same as this one? So can we even start with 1 plus 1? Doesn't even make sense. Unless we say that this is a thing and this is a thing, all of a sudden, they're the same. But these look different to me. For me, it looks like, all right, this is something I don't know. However, I can use it to write my notes and things like this. I don't really know what this thing is. I don't really know what to call it. However, I can put, something that I like in it and drink it. That's what that is. Okay. Another way of thinking of it is through consciousness. So what if 1 plus 1 just equals 1? What if 1 plus 1 just always is 1? And that it's impossible to have more than 1. It's impossible to have more than 1. Because if we say that the number 1 represents existence, so first of all, in 1 plus 1, we have to say that 1 exists. We have to say that something exists. Okay. Now, that's kind of hard. How could we put a number to consciousness? Okay, so that's even in non-duality. So non-duality means not two, and most people think that means that everything is one. It's hard to put a number to what we are experiencing here, right? It's hard to put a number. So what exactly is a number? I don't really know. All I really know is that I'm aware there is consciousness, and there is seemingly something happening. There's something happening. There seems to be some sort of like interpreting going on, and it seems like this interpreting created this idea of 1, and that 1 could be anything that we call things, right? It could be any of this stuff, things that we call stuff. So, I mean, it's hard to say that 1 plus 1 is even a thing. I don't really know what that means. So, when we take math class, all right, guys, 1 plus 1 equals 2. Like, really, I just have to trust that that's true. But now I don't really trust. I don't really know what 1 plus 1 is. And I certainly don't agree 100% that 1 plus 1 equals 2. Because I don't even know if you can have more than 1 of anything. Because what if it's just oneness? Or what if everything is nothing? What if all of this is nothing? All this stuff that we say exists. What if this is nothing? Then where do we go? What is a number? What does 0 mean? Does 0 represent nothing? Or does 1 represent nothing? I don't know. Okay, let's see. We have a couple comments. Alexios has to go. Thanks for this. I'll be back next week. Awesome. Yeah, we'll be talking about politics next week. LOL science, always trying to make sense of the universe, and math too. And then so came mathematics. So math was invented in order to interpret and sense as well. All right. So the last thing is here. So remember, one of my review questions or whatever was, can we trust our own thoughts? So think about that for this week. Can I trust my own thoughts? Now, culture and your mind. So our minds were highly created through culture. And where does science come from? Science comes from the history of our culture. Science, like I said, is kind of a central philosophical tool that most people in our culture believe. So, what would it mean to detox from culture and your mind? So, first of all, can I trust my own thoughts? So, I'm kind of observing my thoughts and things like this. Now, what would it mean to detox? What would it mean to detox from your mind? What would that look like? And what would it look like to detox from culture? So we have 1 week until the election of the US in the US. What are most people going to be doing? Most people are going to be doing the news. They're going to be watching the news. They're going to be on social media like crazy. Most people are going to be feeling a lot of emotions about the election. Okay. Now, the election is a cultural phenomenon. I'll be talking about this next week, but the government is a phenomenon. Okay. Politics is pop culture in the US for sure. So what would it feel like to detox from all of this stuff that I've been talking about? What does that look like for you? So think about it this week. One thing that I've been doing is trying to focus on my subtle addiction, social media. That's actually part of the reason why I'm shifting how I'm doing spiritual download. Is I'm just kind of going live. I care much less about things like subscribers or even making money by doing this. I simply feel called to do what I'm doing right now. I feel called to connect with you guys. I feel called to be thinking about this stuff and things like this. So that's what I feel called to do. That's part of my detox is my relationship with my phone, social media, my YouTube channel, things like this. So, I'm not saying I'm an expert on how to detox all of this, but I think it's going to be unique for you. So I want you to think about what would it look like for me to detox from this heavy culture. Okay. All right. So stay well, stay peaceful. I'll see you guys next week. We will be discussing politics from a philosophical point of view. Peace, peace, peace.